This is Calamity mod. Calamity mod is often regarded as one of the best modded content not just for Terraria but in any game in general. Calamity adds tons of new items, weapons, armors, new biomes, new enemies, and even has its own lore about this strange world. This mod also adds tons of brand new bosses for you to defeat and learn that all have absolutely banger music. Today I'll be ranking all of the bosses in this mod from worst to best. Here's how I will rank them. Bosses must be from Revengeance difficulty, not Death mode and not the Inferno mode. Inferno mod completely changes some of the bosses, and that might be a topic for a future video. Second thing to consider, I played Calamity multiple times, with most of my playthroughs ended up playing as a melee character, as this was the class that I enjoyed the most. Third, I will give each boss a score ranking from F to S. F for bosses that are awful, S for those that are amazing, and stuff like that. Sort of like if this was a tier list video. And one last thing, this is at end of the day my opinion on some of these bosses. So please, if you disagree with some of my takes, keep the discussion at least tame. Please. With all of that out of the way, let's rank these bosses. Let's just be honest, is anyone surprised by this placement? Ravager is easily the worst boss in this mod. He shares a lot of traits like the Golem from vanilla game. Same AI, same moveset, and they share another thing. They are both just bad bosses. Ravager's main mechanic is to restrict your movement with two tall walls that do considerable amount of damage while he keeps punching you with his hands. To deal damage to his body, you must break all of his parts in order to beat him. And once you destroy all of his parts, boss has only one attack. Yeah, this is the rest of the boss fight. The fight has some cool theming and the OST is of course a banger, but that just tells you how good the soundtrack is for this mod. Hopefully in the future this boss will get his much needed rework, but for now he will stay as the worst boss in Calamity. He is Duke Fishron, but old and annoying to fight. Duke Fishron was a pretty fun fight in vanilla game. Fast paced, fair, good rewards, everything about that fight felt on point. So Old Duke is basically everything opposite of that. His health is way too big at the point you are supposed to fight him. His attacks are irritating to deal with, especially the charges since they are not well telegraphed, as he is reading your movement. And there is literally no point to fight him, because his loot is completely useless. I've never used any weapon he dropped. What keeps him from E tier like the Ravager is that his entrance in Acid Rain event is pretty cool. Music again, and on paper I do like the concept of this boss, but the execution leaves it to be much more desired. Stormweaver is one of the 3 sentinels you fight before the Devourer, and he stands out among them. Not for a good reason though. First phase consists of you trying to hit his tail while he keeps following you, while shooting bunch of lasers and lightnings until you break his armor, and then fight becomes very fast paced, where either you get melted or the boss gets melted. A concept that I'm not a fan of. There are some cool looking attacks that are fun to dodge in the second phase, but the fight will be over in less than a minute if you keep attacking him. On its own, it isn't that bad of a boss, but compared to the other 2 sentinels, it's just pathetic. I'll be honest, I keep forgetting this boss exists. He's just meh, like the definition of a meh boss. There is nothing inherently wrong with the boss mechanically, dodging ice spikes, avoiding him when he goes berserk in phase 2, it all works fine. But maybe he is better suited as a pre-hard mode boss rather than a hard mode boss. I could say the same thing with Dragon Folly, but he is somewhat memorable. His sprite is gorgeous, attacks are varied and satisfying to avoid. He feels like a really good mini-boss to me. Fine boss in my book. I really don't know what to say anymore, so let's move on. The first boss of this mod that you will face in your long and difficult journey is a solid introduction to the mod. It starts off with the Scourge itself that is followed by two smaller variants. Scourge will periodically jump upwards to shoot a bunch of small pebbles towards you, smaller variants will keep running toward you to try to hit you, and that is basically the whole fight. He doesn't have that many attacks, but as the first boss, it is a solid challenge that is fun to fight and beat. Based on my research, a lot of people seem to hate this boss. As for me, I just think it's whatever. The fight isn't anything to write home about, it's in a C tier for a reason, but he isn't offensively bad as like the Ravager. Beautiful sprite, solid attacks, solid challenge, relaxing music. Boss is just a definition of a solid fight. Sorry that I'm running out of things to say about these bosses in C tier. They are just mediocre bosses. Okay, look, if I was talking about a previous version of this boss, it would go straight in F tier. They were just awful to fight. Annoying bullet spams that flood your screen, among other things that made the boss so infuriating to fight, and you had to fight it. But after the rework they received, they are so much better. There are three guardians: Healer, Defender and Commander. Healer will send bunch of bullets towards you and will heal other two constantly. Defender will do a bunch of dashes while defending the Commander, and the Commander himself will start charging at you, throw a bunch of fire orbs that will explode into mini orbs, and so on. They also have this laser attack that is deadly, but it is well telegraphed and you can easily avoid it. Their attacks are very similar to a certain goddess that I will talk about later, acting as a stepping stone to that boss. I'll prefer this any day compared to their god-awful previous version. I still can't decide whether I should put them in C or B tier. Maybe for now let's say they are high C, low B tier boss. One of the most iconic bosses in Calamity, Crebulon is such a fun fight at the point you fight it in the game. Attacks are simple, jumping around the arena, throwing a bunch of mushrooms from above, summoning mushrooms that will follow you around, just so many mushrooms. I also personally find this boss much more satisfying as a first boss, more so than the Desert Scourge. I don't know, I think I like the flow of the fight here more than with the Scourge. Also, hot take, music is really good. Ashram Diaz could be a contender for A tier, but the boss suffers from two factors. One, this boss is right before Moonlord, the last boss of hard mode, and his loot isn't really necessary. Two, there is really no incentive to fight this boss. But what keeps him from C tier is the second phase, where he splits in two and now you must take one down to end the fight. It also forces you to be much more careful, as you have to pay attention to both worms' attacks. It's easily the best part of the fight, because it doesn't feel like another generic worm boss. I really like this boss. Her lore is tragic and it made me feel really sorry for her, and the fight itself is also pretty solid. You probably know what to expect. She will send a bunch of orbs that need to be avoided. There is this part where you must avoid small bullet hell attacks while she sends additional orbs towards you. And the laser. That hurts really badly. Mechanically it's simple, but the vibe of the fight and the sad music makes it one of the more memorable bosses in Calamity. Aquatic Scourge is in a lot of ways similar to Desert Scourge. Even its theme is a remix of Desert Scourge's theme, but the fight itself is much better. He will sense sharp bones that will home in on you, he will sometimes keep following you to get a hit on you, and it adds a bit of a complexity where you must avoid these skulls that will give you some dangerous debuffs for a short time. I also like how you can technically fight it pre-hard mode. It feels much more connected to the sulfuric sea biome. Definitely one of the better worm bosses. Here we have another sentinel that you fight before the Devourer, and you can clearly see the gap between Cygnus and Stormweaver. Cygnus will mostly teleport around while sending a bunch of projectiles, and will be sneaky to put some projectiles right behind you to trick you while you're running from him. His most dangerous attack is the one where he will try to dash toward you, and let me tell you, when I saw that his face was a giant mouth, it creeped me out. Like, I can't be the only one that thought those were just his eyes, not teeth. Currently he's a good boss and is more fun to fight than the Stormweaver, but I think he will get a rework since his new sprite was teased recently. Only time will tell. The last B-tier boss is Calamityous clone, who acts like an appetizer before you fight the real Calamityous much later. But this isn't the bad thing. I mean, she's in B tier for a reason. First phase she will shoot bunch of projectiles towards your direction. She will go invincible and you must avoid bunch of projectiles coming from different directions. Then when she is below 50% health, her brothers will spawn. Easily my favorite part of the fight. One will spew out fire breath, while the other will shoot projectiles at you and will constantly ram into you. This fight would be higher on the list, but because of how similar it is to Supreme Calamityous, the fight doesn't feel that unique. I like the boss of course, I love the brothers phase and the bullet hell sections, but like I said, this boss is an appetizer to the real Calamityous. I'm putting these two here because I think they are both equally good. They are both great pre-hard mode challenges and both provide something unique to them. Perforators are spawned in Crimson and the fight revolves around avoiding Perforator's fire orbs coming out of him, while he will periodically summon worms. When the worms are active, Perforator cannot be damaged, so you must take down the worms first and then you can kill the Perforator. Hivemind is a bit different. It is summoned in Corruption and you start the fight with it just standing while his minions do the job for him by constantly attacking you and shooting you with projectiles. Once you take down his health to 80%, it will start flying around and will try to run into you, and he will summon more minions to make the fight more difficult. These two bosses can be really hard, but they are both balanced well for pre-hard mode and are both fantastic fights for early game. If I were to just choose which one I like more, I probably would say Hivemind, maybe because I like the theming and music more. This will probably be a shocker to some of you to see Poltergeist be in top 10. But let me tell you why I love this boss and I think it's underrated. Yes, visually it is clearly a Pantera reskin and that does bring it down, but mechanically it is a great fight. Poltergeist will shoot a bunch of projectiles in your direction and will often charge at you, but the charge is well telegraphed and timing your dash right before it hits you feels satisfying to avoid. As the fight progresses, there will be more projectiles and Poltergeist will dash 2 times in a row. The second phase he will summon the clone of himself and they will both charge at you 3 times in a row. The clone can be killed, but then the original one's aggression will be higher and he will charge 4 times in a row. The fight never feels unfair. If something hit me, I could clearly see what it was, and avoiding the charges of both the clone and original Poltergeist just feels so satisfying to pull off. And the fact that you no longer need to dig out an arena for it makes it a much better fight. Easily the best Sentinel boss, Ceaseless Void is a very unique boss. The orbs you need to destroy before damaging the boss can be tricky to avoid since their pattern can be hard to read, but the black hole attack and avoiding his orbs while he tries to absorb you makes it a very unique boss among the Sentinels. I'll be honest, I was not a fan of this boss, but now that you don't have to make an entire arena for it, I now started to appreciate this boss more and more as the time passes. The best boss pre-hard mode has to offer, Slime God is a brutal yet fantastic boss right before you go defeat Wall of Flesh and enter into hard mode. There are two slimes in this fight, Crebulon and Ebonian, each one with a unique set of attacks. They will both fly in the air and slam the ground to try to crush you, but each one will send different types of projectiles. Ebonian will send them in a half circle, while the Crebulon will send projectiles upwards and then they will fall down. There is also a slime core that you need to watch out for, because if you accidentally get hit by it, you will be slowed down drastically. The slime core will also periodically enter into one of the slimes, making that slime more aggressive than the other. Not to mention that once you take down one of the slime's health down to 50%, it will split into two, so technically you can have 5 different things you need to watch out for. And they also summon smaller slimes around the arena. This all sounds like it would be a mess of a fight, but in practice it works great. Every attack is telegraphed well enough, mini slimes don't have that much HP, and since the slime core will make one of the slimes more aggressive than the other, it makes for a fair and balanced duo boss. And the fact that they both split in 2 smaller variants tells you to focus on one of the slimes first and then go after the other to make the fight less chaotic. Plaguebringer Goliath is another boss that I initially wasn't a fan of. Aside from its gorgeous design, I was not a fan of its mechanics. Then I decided to make an actual arena for this boss in this playthrough and found those mechanics much more well designed. The only attack that I'm a bit iffy on is the charge. Sometimes it isn't clear when he will start charging at you, and that attack really hurts if you get hit by it. Outside of that, the fight is very fast paced and doesn't feel exhausting to fight the boss. And hot take, music good. Exomex is such a frustrating boss because it is really close to being in S tier. But there is one major flaw. When all 3 of them start attacking you, it turns into a total chaos. I mean, the whole fight is really chaotic, but in a good way. Except when they are all attacking you at the same time. I swear, there are certain moments where I just don't even know how I was supposed to dodge a certain attack. I know I started off negatively, so let's go back to positive things. Each Exomech is very unique, not only in their designs, which are probably the best in the whole mod, but also in mechanics. Ares is a big robot machine that will send different types of projectiles from his 4 arms. Artemis and Apollo is a duo that works extremely well with one another, and Thanatos is a giant worm that can be only damaged when the smoke in certain parts of the body starts to appear, and it shoots a ton of lasers. Each one also has a different super attack that are deadly if you get hit by it. My favorite has to be Thanatos' big laser attack. If the part where all 3 of them are attacking you is changed, then this boss will easily end up in S tier. But oh well, at least we have 5 more bosses that are deserving to be in S. Before I played this mod, I heard nothing but praises for this boss. People kept saying that this is one of the best bosses in this mod and that it's an amazing fight. When I first bought the Devourer, it took me 4 hours to finally beat it, and after a couple of playthroughs I can say this confidently, this boss lives up to the hype. So why is the dog so good as a boss? Main gimmick here is to avoid the head at all cost, because if you get hit by his head you lose a ton of health. Second, you must avoid lasers coming from different directions, but they are always telegraphed in which direction they are coming from. What I like about this boss is you can dash into the Devourer to avoid being hit by his head. Later in this phase he will summon cosmic guardians that forces you to be more careful about your positioning. He also has this attack where there will be a ton of lasers everywhere, but the Devourer will go invincible, so you don't have to worry about his head. Plus you can still deal damage to him, and it all ramps up in second phase. More aggression, more lasers, and he starts teleporting around. The music in this fight gives it a much more spectacle feeling than other bosses. The only complaint I have about this boss is his health is way too big. I had attempts that lasted more than 10 minutes, but because of the mechanics and the music it didn't feel too exhausting to fight, unlike Old Duke who relies on dumb mechanics to drag out the fight. Easily the best worm boss in this mod. And now we have the most biased take here. Listen, I just always appreciate a good duo boss, and this one is one of the most enjoyable duo bosses I've fought. You start the fight with Anahita first, where you learn her attacks and tricks she likes to pull off, until you knock her health to 45%, where Leviathan shows up, where you learn his attacks until you knock his health to 45% as well, and now you must fight both of them at the same time, and they work together so well. Anahita will be more passive one, where she will put these notes to slow you down if you walk into them and other projectiles she will throw at you, while the Leviathan will be the one that'll do the charges and throwing giant boulders. I mean, I think those are boulders. And the music is more calming yet sad knowing the lore of these two. Anahita and the Leviathan are easily my favorite pre-Moonlord boss, and definitely one of my favorite duo bosses. I feel like no matter where I put Providence, people are still going to be mad. This is probably the most divisive boss in the whole mod. I can see why. This boss is extremely hard. She has a lot of health, she deals a lot of damage, and there's a lot of things you need to look after. Fireballs, laser, small pellets, spears, and if you get away from her too far, you die instantly. But let me ask you something. Is it unfair though? Like, does it mean you can't avoid any of her attacks? Well, no. Even the laser can be avoided without using Rod of Discord to teleport behind it. Every single projectile can be avoided, you just have to pay attention to your surroundings. All of this can be overwhelming, but once you learn the attacks, you start to appreciate the fight more and more. She even has a unique night form when you fight her at night, and not in a way like now she one-shots you. No, she has completely new attacks, and her old attacks are altered. Wish more bosses had more forms like Providence. This fight is awesome. Everything about this boss is near perfect mechanically. The charges are well telegraphed with Jaron's screeches. Every single time Jaron screeches, he will immediately run into you, but you can dash into him to avoid the attack. Sometimes he will do it 2 times in a row to throw you off guard. He summons these tornadoes that limit your movement and will do various bullet hell attacks that are always followed by the charge. This fight is very fast paced and requires you to be extremely quick with your reactions. And then there is second phase, where there will be more fireballs to dodge. Jaron will start teleporting behind you and then charge at you, fire coming from the sky and so on. And do I even need to mention the roar of the jungle dragon? This is easily the best soundtrack in the whole mod. I mean, even without the music, the fight is still great. It's just that the music escalates it even further.
Couldn't leave us well enough alone, could you? Everything was going well until you came along. Fine, let's settle this now.
But Supreme Calamityous easily takes the #1 spot as the best boss in Calamity. Ever since I first beaten her a while back, she instantly became my favorite boss. Everything about this boss is on point. Bullet hell sections are difficult, but not in an unfair way. If I was hit by something, it was clearly my fault for not paying attention to the projectiles. And those bullet hell phases become more and more complex. When it comes to Calamityous herself, she is no joke either, shooting projectiles from her hand, charges, and so on. However, this boss is unique in a sense that you're stuck in this limited space, so you must adapt to it or else. This fight becomes more and more complex as well after every bullet hell phase, where Calamityous will gain new attacks. Probably my favorite part is the brother phase, where she will summon her two brothers, Cataclysm and Catastrophe, and their designs are insanely good. This is currently the final boss of this mod, and it really feels like a big climactic final battle. The music is incredible, lore behind Supreme Calamityous is great, and the fight is just so much fun. When I first beaten her, I was kinda sad that the fight is over. That just tells you how good this fight really is. Since she is now technically the final boss, she also might take the crown as the best final boss I've ever fought. And that's all of the bosses in Calamity. Overall, while there are a couple bosses that are pretty bad, boss quality is great. I hope I didn't offend anyone with my placements of the bosses. Just remember, this isn't an objective ranking of the bosses, just how I felt about certain bosses. I might make another video about Calamity when a new boss gets added, like Jaron, Xerac or Noxus, but only time will tell. Thanks for watching this video, see you soon with the next one.